News of the massacre didn't simply reach Rome, it tore through the city like lightning striking on a peaceful night. 20,000 men, 3 entire legions, gone, consumed in the dark tangled forests of Germania. And while the city struggled to grasp the scale of the disaster, the emperor himself wandered his palace in shock, slamming his fists into the walls and crying out in despair, "Quintilius Varus, give me back my legions." But the legions were lost forever. Their bones lay scattered beneath Germanic rain, bleaching in the open fields. Their golden eagles, the sacred symbols of Roman honor, now sat as trophies in barbarian sanctuaries. Rome, the mighty eternal Rome, had been wounded. An army that had crushed entire civilizations had been dismantled by tribes the Romans barely considered civilized. The shame was suffocating, the anger uncontrollable. And from that burning humiliation, Rome forged a silent, absolute promise. There would be vengeance, not today, not tomorrow, but it would come. In the months that followed the catastrophe of 9 AD, the empire stood paralyzed. Emperor Augustus, now 72 and worn by age, feared the Germans would use their victory to push into Gaul and threaten Rome's borders. He immediately reinforced the Rhine frontier, sending his best generals and legions to ensure that no barbarian force could penetrate Roman territory again. Meanwhile, the streets of Rome buzzed with fear and superstition.
3 statues now.
People whispered that statues of Augustus had been struck by lightning, that Rome's guardian gods were crying tears of blood. Augustus ordered sacrifices and ceremonies to calm the gods. But deep down, he knew the truth. Only the blood of those who had humiliated Rome would cleanse the shame of Teutoburg. Retribution was necessary, but it needed to be prepared with patience, not rage. Rome rebuilt slowly. The destroyed legions, Suni de 299, were never reformed. Their numbers were retired forever. Like a wound Rome refused to reopen. New legions were trained this time for brutal, close quarters fighting inside the dense, unpredictable forests of Germania. When Augustus died in 14 AD, Tiberius became emperor. Unlike Augustus, Tiberius knew Germania personally. He had fought there for years. He understood the swamps, the forests, the fog, and the terrifying advantage the locals had in their own terrain. He knew revenge required more than strength, it needed the right man. And that man was Germanicus Julius Caesar. Young, brilliant, charismatic, a rising star loved by the legions and adored by the Roman people. Educated, noble, yet deadly when leading troops into battle. Tiberius placed 8 legions under his command and gave him a mission that echoed through every camp along the Rhine: recover the lost eagles, punish Arminius, restore Rome's pride. Barely weeks after Augustus's death, Germanicus crossed the Rhine with more than 30,000 men. This first expedition wasn't a full invasion, it was a warning. Villages burned, fields were destroyed. Small Germanic war bands were crushed without mercy. It was Rome announcing that the reckoning had begun. But the true campaign, the one that mattered, came in 15 AD. Germanicus had spent the winter obsessing over maps and reports from survivors of Teutoburg. He interrogated prisoners, sketched the forest paths, studied every mistake bearers had made. He vowed never to repeat those errors. This time, he wouldn't march blindly into the trees. He wouldn't let himself be trapped in swamps or narrow paths. He wouldn't underestimate Arminius. The man who had once served Rome earned its trust and then destroyed an entire Roman army. To avoid the vulnerability of a single long marching column, Germanicus split his forces. Aulus Caecina would lead 4 legions overland, burning and carving their way through the forests. Germanicus, meanwhile, commanded 4 more legions on board nearly 1,000 ships, sailing the North Sea and entering the Ems River to strike deep into Germanic territory from an unexpected direction. It was bold, dangerous, and brilliant, and it worked. The Germans, stunned by the naval invasion, failed to organize in time. Roman forces landed deep behind enemy lines. Germanicus's troops advanced inland, crushing resistance and destroying settlements. Caecina's overland columns moved cautiously but relentlessly. Learning from Teutoburg, stay tight, scout constantly, fortify every night. Expect an ambush at every tree. Surprise, the Germanic tribe's deadliest weapon was now gone. Then came the moment no soldier was ready for. Germanicus's legions entered a clearing and froze. They had reached the site of the Teutoburg massacre. 6 years had passed, but the battlefield looked untouched. Tacitus later described the site, white bones scattered across the ground. Some piled where men made their last stand, others stretched out where they had fled. Broken weapons, horse remains, human skulls nailed to trees in grim displays. The Roman soldiers stared in horror. Germanicus walked slowly among the remains, his face filled with pain. He ordered the men to gather the bones, all of them, no matter how fragmented or decayed. Many soldiers recognized pieces of armor belonging to lost friends or relatives. That night, under flickering torchlight, Germanicus delivered a funeral speech. The bones, too mixed to separate, were buried together in a single mound. Germanicus placed the first handful of earth. Thousands of legionaries followed. It was a ritual of grief, anger, and remembrance. Rome had not forgotten its dead, and now the living had a fire burning inside them that no German tribe could ever extinguish. The army resumed its march with a new, almost sacred sense of purpose. This campaign was no longer just military, it was personal. Germanic tribes attacked in small ambushes, but Arminius knew these small strikes wouldn't stop Rome. If he wanted to hold his position as leader of the Germanic resistance, he needed a large, decisive victory. He chose his ground carefully, the banks of the Visurgis River, where he positioned his infantry in a sacred grove and hid his cavalry in nearby woods for a devastating ambush. But a deserter revealed his entire plan. At dawn, Germanicus ordered the river crossing. The Romans pushed through the water-formed battle lines and marched forward with calculated precision. Roman cavalry guarded the flanks. Infantry moved with shields interlocked. This time, Rome wouldn't be surprised. Thousands of Germanic warriors charged from the forest, screaming with wild fury, but the Roman line held. Centurions shouted commands. Shields locked tighter. Discipline overcame chaos as the forest erupted into dozens of brutal skirmishes. Arminius, huge, powerful, wrapped in a red cloak, led from the front. Germanicus, gleaming in gold armor, did the same. Both risked everything. But Germanicus had prepared for this battle down to the smallest detail. When the Germanic cavalry attempted to spring their ambush, Roman auxiliary units counter-ambushed them instead. Panic spread. The Germanic line buckled and then collapsed. Arminius, wounded by a Roman javelin, fled into the forest. Germanicus had won a decisive victory, but the war in Rome's thirst for vengeance was far from over. Germanicus's victory at the Visurgis didn't end the fighting, it only intensified it. The Romans pushed deeper into Germania, destroying everything that stood in their way. Villages burned. Food stores were seized or torched. Every tribe that had celebrated the fall of Varus now felt Rome's vengeance closing in like an iron fist. But even as Germanicus advanced, danger was building elsewhere. Aulus Caecina, commanding 4 legions, was marching back toward the Rhine. To return quickly, he chose a route through dangerous marshland, a path known as the Long Bridges, named for the wooden walkways built years earlier to cross the swamp. To the Romans, the route seemed inconvenient but manageable. To Arminius, it was an opportunity sent by the gods. Still recovering from his wounds, Arminius gathered his warriors and took hidden paths through the forest to reach the swamp first. They broke parts of the Roman walkways, flooded sections of the marsh by redirecting streams, and transformed the entire region into a sinking death trap. When Caecina and his legions arrived, everything fell apart immediately. Wagons sank. Horses panicked. Soldiers struggled to move through knee-deep mud that swallowed equipment and slowed entire units to a crawl. The marching column stretched thin for kilometers, vulnerable from all sides. Every rustle in the trees felt like the start of another Teutoburg nightmare. And Arminius did not keep them waiting. Germanic warriors launched a vicious attack from elevated dry ground surrounding the swamp. Projectiles rained down on Romans who could barely lift their shields while trapped in mud. Panic spread like wildfire. Many soldiers remembered their fathers and brothers who had died in the exact same terrain 6 years earlier. Some began to break formation. Desperation filled the air. But Caecina wasn't Varus. He had survived countless campaigns and refused to fall victim to the same mistake. He ordered the abandonment of wagons and non-essential supplies to lighten the march. Then he gathered his officers and coordinated a chaotic but disciplined retreat toward a slightly drier patch of land where they could fortify a temporary camp. As night fell, the situation grew even worse. The Germans knew the swampy terrain better than any Roman, and they attacked relentlessly in the dark. They hurled burning torches over the walls, climbed the palisades, and tried to tear down the defenses with hooks and axes. Roman soldiers fought with every javelin, stone, and sword they had left. Many were wounded, and several areas of the camp came close to collapsing. When Cassina finally returned to his tent, exhausted, he fell into a restless sleep and dreamed of Varus soaked in mud and blood, rising from the swamp and trying to drag him under. The dream jolted him awake. He gathered his officers immediately and gave a speech that would be remembered for years. Varus died because he forgot he was Roman. We will not repeat that mistake. At dawn, he launched a bold counterattack. The Germans expected the Romans to continue stumbling through the swamp, but instead the legions formed a tight wedge and charged uphill into Germanic positions. The suddenness of the attack shocked Arminius's forces. They were used to Romans running, not advancing. Cassina fought fiercely at the front lines, his sword cut through shield and bone. His determination spread through the ranks, and the Romans pushed the Germans back toward the forest. Arminius, already wounded, was struck again, this time in the leg, and had to be carried away by his personal guards. With the enemy retreating, Cassina reorganized his battered legions and took a safer, longer route back to the Rhine. He had avoided a second Teutoburg through discipline, courage, and sheer refusal to die. By the end of the campaign season, Germanicus had cause to celebrate. Rome had won multiple battles, devastated Germanic territory, and pushed the tribes into chaos. But the job was not done. 2 legionary eagles were still missing, symbols Rome valued more than land or glory. Germanicus dedicated the next year, 16 AD, to recovering them. Again, he decided to use naval power. His forces sailed to the mouth of the Ems River and advanced inland into the lands of the Angravari, allies of Arminius and guardians of one of the lost eagles. Roman scouts soon confirmed rumors the eagle of Legio 99 was inside a well-defended wooden fortress built atop a hill. The locals understood exactly what they were protecting. This wasn't just a trophy, it was a symbol of Germanic triumph over Rome. Surrender was unthinkable. Germanicus ordered a full siege. Roman engineers constructed ramps, siege towers, and catapults. For days they hurled stones and fire at the fortress. Flames licked the walls. Smoke billowed through the trees. Yet the defenders refused to yield, shouting curses at the Romans even as their homes burned. Finally, after a week of unbroken bombardment, Germanicus launched the final assault. Legionaries advanced in tortoise formation under a rain of arrows and spears. Ladders slammed against the walls. Men climbed, fell, and were replaced instantly by more soldiers fighting their way upward with pure determination. Inside the fortress, Germanic fighters battled with the desperation of men who knew they were already dead. Rocks crushed Roman skulls. Spears thrust between gaps in shields. Bodies fell from the battlements, but the legions did not relent. For every Roman who died, 10 more climbed. The decisive moment came when Marcus Ventidius, a non-commissioned officer from Campania, was the first to make it onto the wall. He fought like a man possessed, clearing enough space for more legionaries to follow. Soon, the Romans poured into the fortress, hacking through defenses until the last Germanic fighters retreated into a central hut, the hiding place of the eagle. They intended to die with it. Germanicus gave a single order: burn them out. Torches flew into the hut. Smoke poured from the gaps, one by one. The defenders staggered out choking and were cut down at the entrance by Roman blades. When the last of them fell, Ventidius pushed through the smoke, disappeared inside, and emerged moments later coughing, covered in soot, but holding the eagle of Legio 99 high above his head. Thousands of legionaries erupted in cheers. Hardened veterans cried openly. It wasn't just a symbol recovered, it was a piece of Rome's soul, reclaimed from humiliation. Germanicus kissed the eagle, raised it for all to see, and declared, "Today we begin to wash away the shame of Teutoburg. Today the spirits of our fallen brothers may finally rest." With the eagle recovered, Germanicus felt the moment had come to challenge Arminius in open battle, one final, massive confrontation that would decide the fate of Germania. Arminius also understood this. He gathered warriors from every tribe he could convince or coerce, forming one of the largest Germanic armies ever assembled. The brutality of Roman reprisals had terrified many tribes into joining him. Their choice was simple: fight or be annihilated. The two armies met near the Visurgis River again, at a place called Edistaviso, a wide field bordered by forests and hills, perfect terrain for Roman tactics. As dawn broke, Germanicus rode before his 30,000 soldiers, reminding them of the horrors of Teutoburg and the honor they had regained. His words echoed through the ranks, amplified by thousands of voices. "Today we avenge our brothers." Today, Rome shows why it rules the world. Facing them stood an almost equally large Germanic force, but chaotic, loud and undisciplined. Warriors howled, beat their shields, and chanted war songs meant to terrify Rome. The sky filled with javelins, arrows, and stones as both sides opened the battle. Then, with trumpets blaring, Germanicus ordered the advance. The legions moved like an unstoppable machine, shields lockstep synchronized. The Germans countered with a furious, disorganized charge. The collision shook the earth. For a few terrifying minutes, the Roman line bent but did not break. Discipline won over raw ferocity. Legionaries thrust their short swords through the gaps in shields, cutting down wave after wave of attackers. Arminius, realizing he couldn't break the center, tried to lure the Romans toward the forest where ambushes lay. But Germanicus anticipated the trick. He kept his infantry tight and sent cavalry to crush the Germanic flanks. Battle dissolved into dozens of violent clashes across the field. The Roman center advanced relentlessly. Horses trampled fleeing warriors. Auxiliary archers poured arrows into retreating groups. Arminius, desperate, led a final furious charge straight at Germanicus's position. He cut down the first line of guards. For a heartbeat, he and Germanicus were only meters apart. A Roman shield-bearer leapt in front of Germanicus and took Arminius' spear through his chest. The Roman second line counterattacked immediately, forcing Arminius back. His last attempt had failed. The Germanic army collapsed. Warriors fled in every direction, chased by Roman cavalry. Bodies littered the field. Arminius, bleeding again, managed to escape into the forest with a handful of loyal followers. The battle was over and Rome had won. Victory at a Distaviso should have ended the war. But Germanicus wasn't finished. He wanted Arminius broken beyond recovery. For several more weeks, he pushed deep into Germania, chasing scattered survivors, burning rebellious villages, and punishing every tribe that had given shelter to Rome's enemies. But as summer faded and exhaustion spread through the legions, he finally ordered the march back toward the Rhine and prepared to sail home. Then disaster struck from an enemy far older and more unpredictable than any Germanic warrior to see. Germanicus's fleet, hundreds of ships, strong set, sail along the North Sea. At first the winds were calm, the water almost welcoming. But then, without warning, the sky darkened. Winds lashed the sea into a violent frenzy. Waves slammed against hulls and shattered them like toys. Legionaries were thrown overboard, tossed helplessly in the raging water. Supplies disappeared into the depths. Ships capsized. Others broke apart on unseen rocks. By the time the storm ended, Rome had lost more men and more ships than in any battle against the Germans. Some soldiers washed ashore days later, crawling onto the sand like ghosts. Their armor rusted, their faces gone. Others drifted in splintered wrecks for miles, praying for rescue. Many simply vanished beneath the waves, never to be found. The surviving legions trudged back to their winter quarters, battered, shaken, and grieving. They had crushed Arminius' army, recovered one of the lost eagles, and achieved the revenge Rome demanded, yet this storm felt like a warning. A reminder that Germania, for all of Rome's power, was still wild, hostile, and cursed. In Rome, Emperor Tiberius received the news of Germanicus' victories with a mix of pride and discomfort. On one hand, vengeance for Teutoburg had been achieved. 2 of the 3 lost eagles were now back in Roman hands. The legions had proven their dominance. Germanic tribes had suffered devastating losses. Roman prestige had risen again. But Germanicus' growing popularity terrified him. The Roman people adored Germanicus. The legions worshipped him. Senators praised him as the man who restored Rome's honor. Celebrations erupted in every corner of the empire whenever news of another victory arrived. Tiberius saw something dangerous in all this admiration. A general beloved by the people was always a threat to the emperor, especially when that general was young, charismatic noble-born, and the grandson of Augustus. So in the year 17 AD, Tiberius sent Germanicus a command wrapped in polite language but crystal clear in purpose: return to Rome. The war in Germania is over. Let the tribes destroy themselves with their own infighting. It was a strategic argument. Germania was vast, poor, and politically fractured. Fully conquering it would require countless legions and decades of occupation, with very little reward in return. Many historians still believe Tiberius was right, but the timing was no coincidence. Germanicus' victories had become too bright, and Tiberius preferred shadows. Germanicus returned home to a hero's welcome. Rome erupted with celebration. He rode through the streets in a magnificent triumph, with Germanic captives on display piles of captured weapons and the recovered eagle carried proudly behind him. Cheers rolled across the city like thunder.
Hail Hail, great
Flowers
commander,
rained from balconies.
Savior of Rome.
It was one of the greatest triumphs
The
of the
victory
age.
is ours.
But his glory would be short-lived. Only 2 years later, while on assignment in Syria, Germanicus fell mysteriously ill and died at the age of 33. His supporters whispered the same rumor he had been poisoned on Tiberius's orders. Whether true or not, the suspicion alone told the story. A man beloved by Rome had died far too young, far too suddenly and far too conveniently. As for Arminius, he survived Rome's revenge, but peace did not follow him. The Germanic tribes, briefly united against a common enemy, returned to their old rivalries. Many accused him of seeking to make himself king, a title Germanic warriors despised. Betrayal came not from Rome, but from his own people. Arminius was assassinated by relatives in 21 AD. Two men locked in a clash of empires, both dead before their 40th birthdays. Germania remained unconquered. Rome, despite its victories, never again attempted a full-scale occupation. The Rhine became the permanent dividing line of the empire, a frontier that endured for centuries. Yet the memory of Teutoburg and the vengeance that followed remain carved into the identity of both Romans and Germans. For Rome, the campaigns of Germanicus became proof that even the greatest disasters could be answered. The empire had been humiliated, but it had struck back with unmatched discipline and force. Germanicus's victories restored confidence in Roman power, teaching future generations that Rome could bleed, but it would never break. For the Germanic tribes, Arminius became a symbol of resistance, a hero who had defied the world's most powerful empire and survived. Even though he later fell to internal betrayal, his legacy endured. Centuries later, German national identity would elevate him to legendary status, calling him Hermann, the liberator of Germania. The lands where these battles were fought changed forever. Forests that once echoed with war cries and marching legions turned quiet. Villages reduced to ash never rose again. Roman forts along the Rhine remained watchful, facing the dark tree line, with a mixture of vigilance and memory. Veterans of the campaigns carried the scars for life. They returned to Rome celebrated as heroes. But many never forgot what they had seen or done. They remembered burning huts with